Heather Nemelka was in her 40s, raising her 5 children full-time when her husband suddenly filed for divorce.
Our financial situation was much worse than I thought it was. And so initially, I had actually thought I'd be fine and I wouldn't have to start working right away. And so I felt this feeling of desperation. I've got to start making a living like yesterday. And all of a sudden, I was the main provider. My husband at the time wasn't working. And so I just knew it was all on me. And I had really thought at first that it was going to be easy to get a job. So I was like, well, I have a college degree. I'm a hard worker. I can do it. And so when I wasn't given the opportunity to interview and people weren't knocking down my door, that was really, really hard. And so I definitely was like depressed because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to support my family.
Welcome to the Why Magazine podcast, bringing you stories, ideas, and voices from Brigham Young University. Today we get to talk to BYU alum Heather Nemelka about her own return to the workforce after caring for children full-time and her mission to help other moms do the same. As of 2021, 26% of mothers and 7% of fathers in the United States are full-time stay-at-home parents, according to a Pew Research study. When life circumstances or career plans change, or as inevitably kids start growing up, it can be tricky for these parents to find new employment. That's why Heather started Elevare, a company that provides free workshops, mentoring, and a community to specifically help moms re-enter the workforce. Today we'll talk about how to figure out what career options to pursue, how to build confidence, and how to leverage home management experience for resumes and interviews. Heather initially graduated from BYU with a communications degree, but after a short time working in that field, had her first baby and decided to take care of her children full-time. Almost 20 years later, when she had to find a way to provide for her kids, she didn't really know what to do.
I had applied to 88 jobs and hadn't heard back from any of them. And I thought, of course, no one's going to hire me because I haven't been in the workforce for so long. And I didn't feel like I had relevant skills. I felt like I wouldn't hire me either, you know?
Heather's brother was very supportive during the job search, and he offered to set up an informational interview with one of his friends. They weren't hiring, but it would give her practice. During the interview, the company offered to pass her name along to other people who might be hiring, but instead they called her back and offered her a job.
At first, it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, here I was in my 40s and I was getting offered the job of a marketing coordinator, which is something you get right when you graduate from college. But I didn't have the experience to go along with it. And I felt like if I proved myself and worked really hard for that year, I could show that I was actually manager material.
And she did prove herself. She got promoted, then she pivoted to a tech company, and then to her own surprise, she decided to start the Executive MBA program at BYU.
It was definitely not on the docket, but when I prayed about it, I knew it was exactly what I was supposed to do. And it was hard. It was a really, really hard experience. And that going back to school to get my MBA changed my life. I can speak with full assurance that had I not done my MBA, I wouldn't have the confidence I have today. I wouldn't have the connections that I have today. Certainly, I wouldn't have the education. So sometimes going back to school is the right thing to do. And I would never, ever in a million years change it. And so then during this whole process of building in my career and joining boards and doing hard things, I kept having individuals reaching out to me and saying, Heather, my sister is getting divorced. Can you help her? Or my wife and I need help. I've just lost my job. She needs to get a job. Can you help her? And just over and over again, people kept getting referred to me. And during this process, I knew I wanted to start a company. And so I thought I was going to start a tech company. And my cousin said to me, why are you starting this tech company? Don't you help women, get back into the workforce? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, why don't you just build that? And sure enough, that was what I was supposed to do. And so I'm able to use all of the skills and resources and tools that I wish I had had back then to help women now find themselves and kind of rediscover themselves. Because I think in the process, I was in my 40s and I had kind of lost myself in the journey of motherhood. And I love being a mom. And if you can be a mom, it's the most amazing blessing. And I think Heavenly Father really wants us to embrace that calling. But I do think it's important to discover your divine identity and purpose outside of motherhood, because even though we know that that's really important, Heavenly Father has given us these talents and skills that He also wants to see us develop. And so that's something I also love helping women, is rediscovering who they are, in addition to being great mothers.
So let's talk about this. What are some of the challenges that women face when they're trying to get a job after being a full-time caregiver or a home manager?
Yeah. I think the lack of confidence is probably the biggest challenge, just uncertainty about who they are and what they can offer. As soon as you go outside of that, outside of the caregiving role, you all of a sudden think, oh, well, what can I do? And you forget really quickly all the things you used to do before, or even the
Yeah.
things you might have done as a caregiver. You might have done PTA, you might have done some community volunteer work, but you forget. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have any worth. I don't have any value to add. So I think that the lack of confidence is a big challenge. And I think also translating those caregiving skills into the workforce, right? You're developing empathy and communication and multitasking and project management. And certainly with children, you're also doing event planning and conflict resolution and negotiation. And the list goes on and on. I think those two barriers is, the lack of confidence and also being able to translate those caregiving or mom skills into job skills.
Yeah. And running an organization, like really it's the home management aspect of it is huge as well.
Yeah, it's really, I tell women this is that you are the CEOs of your organization, and it just happens to be inside of a home, and you just happen to not be getting paid for it.
Right.
But I think that's where I think if we could realize that we are so much more, that we have so much more to offer because of all of these projects and people and situations that have been coming at us for years, then we would feel a lot more comfortable and confident going back into the workforce because we can see the value that we've been providing all along.
Right. And even that it provides economic value. I think that's another way we undervalue ourselves.
Yeah. You think about, the chauffeur, the cook, the cleaning, all of the work that goes on in the household. And the value is immense. And think about those people, the lives of the children that you are caring for. They're going to grow up to be amazing, hopeful, contributors to society. So the value there is huge as well.
Yeah. Well, and the other unique thing for this career of caregiving is that you really literally do work yourself out of a job. And so in those busy years when it is so intense, you don't really have time for a lot of personal development because you are just working a lot. You're working endless hours and you're focused on everybody else. We're both kind of firmly planted in our midlife, and my friends and those around me in the same stage sometimes come up a little bit lost when they suddenly aren't in such high demand. They're not so busy with the day-to-day caregiving. Their children are becoming self-sufficient. How do you help women even know what they want to do at that stage?
The challenge I see is a lot of women, a lot of these caregivers, it's such a selfless act. And we get really used to sacrificing. And that's a beautiful thing. But I try to tell younger moms to, if you can at all possible, like try to set aside time to develop yourself, even if it's only 30 minutes or you're just taking an online course or doing something for yourself, because I think we think we're doing the right thing by sacrificing ourselves in the process. And I don't think we're meant to completely sacrifice for our household. I think we're meant to leave some for ourselves. And so women that come into this period of uncertainty, of feeling very confident, maybe as a mother or running the household, to now figuring out what is it that I want to do with myself.
Yeah.
I tell women to make a list of all the things that they love to do, or that they used to love doing. Like, did you used to love to run? Did you love to paint? Did you love to explore nature, travel, read, whatever it is, these things that we put on the back burner for our families. And I want you to remember how those feelings made you feel and what gave you the most excitement. And then from that, they can then determine what it is that they want to do. And so I think it's definitely a process where they have to take the time to kind of remind themselves of who they used to be and who they've always been inside, but haven't been able to see. And that process is very revealing because we put our wants and oftentimes our needs on the back burner for others in the family so that they can have what they need and want. And we forget ourselves. And so we really need to take the time to rediscover who we are.
Yeah. And what did that look like for you?
Well, to be honest, since I was like thrown into the workforce, I didn't get a chance to do that. I didn't get a chance to do the work of just rediscovering myself. I had to go right back into the workforce, and I just needed a job, whatever would pay the bills. And that sometimes happens. But in that process, you also learn what you like and what you don't like too. So that's a good thing. And so in changing different companies and different jobs, I learned I really love interaction with people. My preference is to be on a team with others that I can interact with.
But I think a lot of people are in that situation, and that's comforting to just know that, like, whatever actions you're taking to move forward, even if that's jumping into a job that you're pretty sure is not the one you want, that is still moving forward and you're not wasting your time.
Totally. And I think we have to realize that any progress in our journey is leading us to where we're ultimately supposed to be. I think there's a plan for all of us, and Heavenly Father knows our unique situation and our plan, and choices that we make affects that, but He already knows the end from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, the inciting incident for me to start exploring what I wanted to do was just my youngest starting preschool. And suddenly I could come up for air. You know, I'd been raising these 5 young children. And suddenly I had a couple of hours to myself, and I could, you know, invest that back into my home and family, or I could take, you know, some of that time and figure out what I wanted to do. And for me, it was very obvious that was writing. That's what I did before children. And so I started a blog about parenting and home management.
Nice.
And kind of went from there.
And I think it's okay to not know for a little while too. Like, I think
Right.
it's okay to try different things.
I was blessed in that way, I think. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I remember I took a stained glass making class, and I thought I was going to become an artist with stained glass because I love stained glass. I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Took this class and I realized I'm terrible at it and I don't like it. It takes too long and I cut my fingers and it wasn't enjoyable. But I think you've got to expose yourself to different things and talk to other people, right? Like talking to you right now is so great because it also helps me think, oh yeah, I love writing. I think and so sometimes you have to be exposed to other people's journeys to find your next path as well.
Right. And some things you'll be like, oh, well, I want to keep that as a hobby, maybe not, you know, as a career. But just trying them allows you to get a better sense of what those interests are going to become. So that's cool.
Yeah. And it can even be like volunteer work that you do that gives you a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment. You may not be getting paid for it, but I don't think that that's as important as it is to finding where you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to help.
Sometimes I feel like you need to just take chances and put yourself out there, and you never know. Like, it doesn't hurt to ask. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing what we're doing right now. I had worked as an intern at Y Magazine back when I was a student at BYU. And as I was, you know, getting established with my own podcast, my husband and I were actually out to dinner and thinking, like, if we weren't doing this job, the jobs that we're doing right now, what would we want to do? And I was like, I would still want to do a podcast, but maybe a different kind of podcast. And we're like, well, does BYU have a podcast? And we kind of looked, and there are several podcasts at BYU, but there wasn't one for the magazine. And so that very night I came home, and at like midnight, I wrote an email to the editor of the magazine, and I said, hey, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? And that kind of started some conversations. So sometimes the career you want or the job you want doesn't even exist, and you can kind of make it come into being.
Oh, I see. I love hearing that story, because that's again where we have these abilities and these talents that we don't even know that we need to offer them to other organizations and people. And you just were so brave and just put yourself out there. And now you're doing the podcast and providing value to others. And it would never have happened if you hadn't just thought, okay, I can do this. And
Well, yeah, and
getting
it's
out of
my
your
dream
comfort.
job. I got to kind of build my own dream job, so it's pretty great.
Love that. Well, and in fact, that reminds me that a job that a recruiter had reached out to me about a job that was not what I wanted to do at all, but somebody had said it's always important to do the interview. So even if it's not what you think you want to do, just do the interview. And this recruiter, this company ended up giving me a different job. When I told them that I
Oh,
wasn't interested, they found another job and they gave that to me. So I think it's always important to put yourself out there, like, either create the job that you would like to have or help them see what is possible.
yeah. Yeah, and you think it's risky, but it's not. Like the worst that they could have said was no, you know?
And my mom used to always say, if you don't ask, the answer is no, right? So
Yeah.
you always ask, and it's not a big deal. And sometimes the answer may be no at first, but it's just maybe a temporary no even, and they're not ready for it. So the fact that you think, oh, it's rejection might just be redirection, right?
Yeah, or you're not ready for it and you can ask, well, what should I do in the meantime to develop those skills?
Perfect. I love that. That makes a huge difference because we all have certain skills that we've got to acquire, and sometimes the timing isn't right. The Lord's timing is always perfect, but we're not always ready.
Well, let's move on to kind of the next step then. So if you've been taking care of your family full time, how do you start to put a resume together when you maybe haven't had a lot of really tangible work experience with an employer?
Well, I went through my files and found my old resume. First of all, I was surprised I could even find it. And then second of all, it wasn't on the computer because the internet didn't exist when I had my jobs before I left the workforce. And so I went through the resume to see what was relevant. And honestly, there wasn't a lot. I mean, definitely my education, but I felt like everything else was outdated. And what I ended up doing was I still put it together outdated because I was having these informational interviews, which aren't job interviews. So you can still feel confident that you can share things that are outdated and there's no a big deal. But I also looked back at past journals. I looked at what I'd done. I asked family members, what are some of the things I used to do that I've done, awards. I literally went through everything. And I remembered, volunteer PTA experience that I had forgotten about. So I put that on my resume. I was the director of a book fair. I taught, classes through my church. So I changed my resume that used to say work experience. I changed it to say experience. And I think that's really important that you can put things on your resume that you weren't paid for, but they were still experience, and listing different projects that you did. And so I did that as well. And then someone told me that hiring managers really like numbers. So it's important to quantify your efforts. So with my book fair, I knew how many volunteers we had the year prior to me becoming the book fair director and how many volunteers we had my year. And I was able to show that we increased volunteers 30%. We raised X amount of dollars. We gave away X amount of books to the school. I mean, it was just all put it in numbers, right? So my first resume had a lot of gaps, but I also was able to, over time, because I got this job, and every job you get new experience and just fill the gaps. And I think it's important with your resume, to own the gap of work experience. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's something to be very proud of.
Right. Well, and it sounds like really owning it as not a gap. It was not a gap in work.
Right.
It was work.
Yeah, really, when I talk about this gap, I always put in like in quote marks or whatever, because I
Yeah.
don't really think of it as a gap, because you're still learning, you're still growing, you're providing value. You just weren't getting paid
And you're working hard.
working. In fact, I hate that term stay-at-home mom, because
Me
no
too.
mother stays home. They are literally working their tails off all day long, running errands, picking up kids, buying groceries, taking kids to appointments. And I think that devalues motherhood in general as well.
I always struggled with that form at the doctor's office where we had to like put our occupation, and I'm like, what do I put? Homemaker, mom, CEO of the house, one of
Yeah.
the many euphemisms, domestic diva or whatever. Yeah, it was always just like this little existential crisis. What am I? So So that's why I always say caregiver and home manager, because there's the parenting part and then there's the home organization and just everything that goes into running that organization.
No, I actually love that. I think that's a great way to describe the time that you've been, helping run the household and taking care of your, parents or your children. Something else that I thought was really interesting is a woman that I came across. She was in the workforce, but she said when she had to return to the workforce, she hadn't had all this experience, and she worked with someone and discovered that all of the caregiving that she had been giving her, she had a child that had lots of medical issues. She was able to put down all of the different pieces of equipment that she had to learn. She learned all these procedures. She put all of this, and she ended up getting her job in a healthcare organization by showing all of this relevant caregiving that she had done in the medical, space.
Yeah. And I think the creativity applies in finding a different application for those skills that you've learned to even identify where to apply, or what type of work you're qualified for. That's really interesting. So now you've got your resume together and it's time to start applying for jobs. How do you know where to apply? How do you start that interview process? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, back in the day, I did not have ChatGPT or these AI tools. And I really love to tell women to get on to some of these free tools and put in exactly what they are thinking that they want to do. You could say, these are the things that I am interested in. Here's my experience. Here's my education. What are some of the roles that I should apply for? And this is a very important part of the job process, because technically you probably could do any number of entry-level jobs. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what you'd want to do and apply for those. Right now in the job market, it's really competitive right now. Even those entry-level jobs are super challenging to get even interviews for. Lots of college students who are graduates or graduating are finding it difficult to land any interviews with entry-level jobs. And so I oftentimes will tell women to do the research to determine what it is that interests them and apply for jobs initially that align with your experience. So if you had graduated in education and you don't think you want to be a teacher or an administrator, but you have that experience, I oftentimes will tell women, go ahead and apply for those entry-level jobs in the area that you already have experience in or some knowledge of, because then you'll feel more confident initially, and then you can pivot to another role. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do at first. Just getting into something that will make you happy and help you feel fulfilled can be really valuable.
That's great. So tell me about going back as a returning student. What was that like?
Well, I did the executive MBA program, so the students were older.
Okay.
There were some in their 30s and some in our 40s and even some in 50s as well. And so I was among other older people, but I felt like my brain wasn't functioning anymore. I felt like I couldn't remember anything. It took some time for these muscles to get back into gear. And something I love telling people is it's like muscle memory. As soon as you start to have these, exercises and you're having to study and think and process, you quickly start to remember how to do that when you were young, right? And I think that was something I was super grateful for. I think if you're feeling like you're going to have some challenges with your classes, you need to hire a tutor or get the help from classmates. Oh, that's something else. The classmates were so helpful. Like there was no competitive side to it at all. Everybody was very helpful. And I don't know if all graduate programs are that way, but at BYU, it was that way. And it was amazing. Something else that was a beautiful experience during the program is one of the professors said that I promise you, if you set aside Sunday for church and family and you don't do any homework, you will be blessed. I promise you that. And I took that promise to heart, and I did not do any homework on Sundays, and I ended up having a beautiful experience where Sundays were really reserved for worship, family, and rest. And his promise was true. And I also, at least at BYU, because there's such a spiritual side to education, my testimony strengthened. I learned how to pray better and study my scriptures better. And I benefited from the testimony and example of other students. We had some students that weren't members of the church, and I got a chance to share the gospel with them. And so, in fact, one of our classmates, she joined the church during the program. And
Wow.
there were some beautiful experiences out of that I wouldn't trade for anything.
That's great. Well, and I love that there are so many options these days. When I decided, okay, I'm going to start podcasting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go from writing to podcasting. I loved podcasts, and talk about not knowing anything. I didn't know what technology to get. I knew how to listen to podcasts, but I didn't know how to make one. But it's amazing, like, what resources are available to us. I could listen to other podcasts about how to start a podcast. And then eventually I've started going to conferences where I just like learn all this information about how to be better at the craft and things like that. So sometimes a traditional education might be the route to go. And sometimes it's just doing it, starting. So if that's not feasible for you for whatever reason, you still have young kids, or, whether it's time or money or whatever's holding you back, there are so many educational resources.
So many. In fact, I'm glad you said that, because we sometimes forget that you don't have to pay money to get the education, right? You can do some things online that are completely free. And so budget should never be a barrier to getting your education. And nowadays too, you can get online certifications, and you can do so much more that I couldn't even possibly have imagined when I was going through my undergraduate, that now you have so many more options, and you can do it at your pace, right? So you could do it when it works for you, when your kids are asleep, or when you have that extra time in your day, and you can take your time to do it in the way that will be most effective for you and your learning style too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing world. We never have to stop learning. Love it.
Yeah.
So once you have the job, you're started in the career, this is a new thing to deal with too, right? Because you've been focused on your family and your home for so long, and now suddenly you're having to balance those two.
For me, it's important to prioritize what's most important when you can. So when I re-entered the workforce, I felt this sense of terrible guilt that I was away from my kids, and I wasn't there to make them after school snacks, and I wasn't there to help them with their homework. And there were so many things that I felt a huge sense of mom guilt for. And I had to recognize that I was still doing a lot of really good things. And I tried to take time to read to them at night so that we always had that time together. I did that religiously when I went back to school to get my MBA. And I just needed them to know that I was spending time with them, and that they could count on that. And you think that it's going to be the worst thing not to be home all the time and help them and stuff. And actually, there were so many blessings that came out of that, where my kids had to learn to be more independent, and they had to help and drive and do more chores and build some resilience themselves out of the process. So I would say that you're going to feel off balance many times in your life, but it's important to always keep what's most important in perspective. So even though you may not be able to go to the temple as often as you want to, because you're in this period of working all the time, that you get there when you can, or you prioritize, your family when you can, but also recognize sometimes you've got a big work assignment, and that's going to be the priority at that time. But I tell mothers especially, there's no such thing as this, work-life balance. There's always going to be imbalance. And that's actually what you want. You want to always feel like you're growing and changing, and those in your life also adjust. So.
Oh, that's a really good reframing. Well, this has been so great. Is there anything else you just want to leave listeners with?
So I think if I could leave anything with your listeners, it would be to help them trust the confidence that others in their life have in them. So whether it's a supportive brother or sister, mom, dad, anybody in your life that believes you can do it, to trust that they're right. And that confidence that others have will carry you when you don't believe you can do it. And I think all of us have a supportive brother or sister, mom and dad, relative, friend, that know that we're capable of great things. We just have to trust them.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Y Magazine podcast. If you liked this episode, you'll probably also enjoy a couple of our very first podcasts, one about some of the first women in BYU's chaplaincy program called BYU's Pioneers in Chaplaincy, and one about another alumni entrepreneur, Cake by Courtney, Baking, Business, and Faith. You may also enjoy an episode about a program at BYU called Sandbox. The episode is called In Good Company, Students Build Real Businesses in 2 Semesters. This episode is based on an article about Heather Nemelka in the fall 2025 issue of Y Magazine. The Y Magazine podcast is produced by me, Whitney Singley Archibald, with executive producer Brooklyn Hughes Romer, and original music and final production by Jarrett Davis.